Now I'm getting to part 4, which is the last part, which is entitled America's Vital Role. We have come to the final part. In the previous 3 parts, I discussed how Korean Peninsula came to be partitioned in the aftermath of World War II by the external forces. That there is little or nothing the two Koreas can do on their own to bring about their country's reunification under the existing international circumstances. And that the geopolitics of two main players of the region, America and China, is ultimately responsible for the status quo in the Korean Peninsula. I've also discussed how the Korean issues of reunification as well as denuclearization can be resolved through the creation of Asian Switzerland, if you will, in the Korean Peninsula. In this final part, I'm going to discuss the critical role America has to play in this historic international endeavor if the recipe as presented here is going to be a success. What role should America play in order to resolve the Korean issues? The most critical role that America should and can play is to take the helm in initiating the appropriate steps towards establishing the Treaty of Korean Neutrality between the regional powers, i.e. America, China, Japan, and Russia. There is a very important reason why America, not China, should take the initiative in this effort. If China takes initiative in promoting the cause of permanent neutrality of the Korean Peninsula, it is very likely to provoke strong negative reactions and mistrust from South Korea and Japan. This is largely due to the long, bitter memories of the unfortunate historical experiences between China and its neighboring countries, triggering deep suspicions from South Korea and Japan, regardless of China's true intent, will be detrimental to achieving the goals of Korean neutrality, reunification, and denuclearization. For this important reason, it should be Washington that should take the initiative to begin a dialogue with China concerning the Korean issues. If and when through a series of American-led talks, United States and China were to reach an agreement that the entire Korean Peninsula should be permanently neutralized like Switzerland, and that the two Koreas are free to pursue a peaceful and democratic reunification, the stage would be finally set. It would be interesting to see how the two Koreas, Japan and Russia, would respond to the joint calls of America and China for the establishment of permanent neutrality of the Korean Peninsula. Here are some of my assessments regarding the matter. Foremostly, one of the focal points to watch would be how the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, would respond. It would not be an easy task to predict. Although Kim might basically be in favor of the idea of creating permanently neutralize Korean Peninsula, he may become apprehensive about having a democratic form of government generally practiced in the Western world. Given the fact that the overwhelming majority of the Korean people are living in South Korea, approximately 45 million versus 25 million. On the other hand, given Kim's audacious personality traits, it's not inconceivable that Kim might honor the will of the major regional powers and allow a peaceful and democratic process of reunification of his fatherland to proceed and decide to retire from politics honorably with some kind of assurance for personal protection. After all, the unification of his fatherland was the highest aspiration of his father and grandfather. And Kim's supreme loyalty, I hope, belongs to the nation called Korea, not to the ideology called communism. In such an event, Kim's unexpected act of self-abnegation will be laying, I believe, an important cornerstone for the cause of peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula. And perhaps history will remember kindly of Kim, because of that. There's another possible course of action Kim might pursue. He might resort to violent means to protest the idea of Korean neutrality and democracy, threatening with nuclear arms in order to prolong his current power position. I think most of South Korean people would believe that this would be the most likely course of action for him, would be the most likely course of action Kim would take. That would not, of course, be a rational course to take for him, but we will never know. We'll never know, depending on what kind of attitude Kim will take on this issue. His regime could be one of the sticking points that demand very special attention from both America and China. How about the North Korean people's response in general? It would be very, very interesting to watch their response to the joint cause of China and America for the creation of a unified Korean Peninsula based on the principle of permanent neutrality and democracy. They have probably been brainwashed for decades by the political educational system of the North Korean regime. So many North Korean people might believe that America is intrinsically imperialistic and that the only reason for continuing divide in the Korean Peninsula is because of American military support for South Korea. And that the only way to unify the country is by way of overcoming American imperialism through military means. However, it would be hasty and imprudent to underestimate the potential power of North Korean people's hidden aspiration for individual freedom and economic well-being that can be expected from the reunification of the country, based on the principle of permanent neutrality and democracy. Now, what about the possible reactions from South Korean government and people? I'm pretty confident that the government of South Korea would be inclined to go along with the idea of Korean neutrality as proposed jointly by America and China. However, I believe there will be some strong opposing views, opposing voices from the ultra-conservative element of South Korea, who think that the absorption of North Korea by South Korea is the only way to unify the nation. Many of them seem to entertain the notion that China will soon collapse economically and politically, and so will North Korea, and that America will be the sole dominant power in East Asia. Then they believe South Korea will should be able to take over North Korea and bring about reunification of the country under the South Korean constitution. It is clear that the many South Korean people prefer to live separately. As long as North Korea is in such a poor condition economically, politically, socially, and technologically. Some are concerned that it will be just too burdensome to merge together with much poorer North Korea, although some South Koreans would be very wary about the current North Korean regime and its belligerent behavior with nuclear weapons, and would think that North Korean dictatorship will try to misuse the neutrality idea for their own political end. I know it will not be an easy task to persuade these people of two Koreas who would strongly oppose the idea of permanent neutrality. However, we have to understand that the voice of opposition from both South and North Korea is largely based on their sense of insecurity and the fear of the unknown. And one should not underestimate the technical and tactical challenges involved in this historic task after such a long period of division under fundamentally different political and social systems. No doubt there will be many challenging inter-Korean issues to be resolved and overcome before the country can finally be unified peacefully under a democratic system of government. I'm confident, however, that all the technical challenges, being what they are, can be controlled and overcome in the end. In any event, it may be necessary that the extremist political elements in both North and South Korea that do not accept democracy as a form of government of unified Korea be excluded from participating in the democratic unification process. It is certain that the overwhelming majority of North and South Koreans will be supporting the idea of establishing a permanently neutral and democratic nation throughout the Korean peninsula, like Switzerland. They will eventually learn that the two Germanys were able to unify their nation peacefully and democratically despite the fundamental ideological differences and economic cleavage between the two, as the case of the two Koreas. And that unified democratic Germany eventually became one of the wealthiest nations in the world today. Given sufficient time and support from both America and China, the people of two Koreas should be able to pursue their dream of national reunification successfully, based on the concept of permanent neutrality of Korea. Japan will also most likely be accepting the joint proposal of America and China for Korean neutrality. Japan will be happy to be freed from the current nuclear threat from North Korea. Also, Japan should be able to reduce its military spending significantly when the entire Korean peninsula is permanently neutralized, resulting in drastically reduced tension in the region. And there is no question that Japan will be a long-term economic beneficiary of more stable peace in the peninsula and the Pacific region. In any case, as strong allies, it is highly unlikely that Japan will go against American initiative in this crucially important political matter of East Asia. Russian response might be more intriguing and complicated for its own geopolitical reasons. The continuation of the divided Korean peninsula and some tensions in the region would provide Russia with some leverage in its dealings, in its relations with China and America. In other words, Russia's geopolitical interest might be well served by maintaining status quo in the Korean peninsula. But it would be highly questionable that it would be in Russia's long-term interest to openly oppose the idea of Korean neutrality and play the role of spoiler. For in such an event, Russia's political loss will far outweigh the geopolitical advantage of keeping the status quo. It is also conceivable that the permanent neutrality of the Korean peninsula might be established without Russian participation in the treaty, in the event that Russia refused to join in. That is to say, the Korean neutrality treaty can very well be established for all practical purposes among the three regional powers, America, China, and Russia, America, China, and Japan. Now it's time to conclude. I'd like to make just a few concluding remarks here. Once again, it seems the fate of Korea, of more than 70 million Korean people, is in the hands of America. It was the international politics dominated by the two major world powers then, America and the former Soviet Union, that was responsible for the Korean partition in the aftermath of World War II. Since then, there were no ways for the two Korean people. There were no ways for the Korean people to escape from the trap of world politics, and so the Korean tragedy continues. Rectification of the international injustice done to the innocent people of Korea is long overdue. I believe it is morally and politically right for both America and China to jointly engage in efforts to resolve the fundamental issue of Korean unification now, once and for all. I, as a lifelong student of political science, have presented here the concept of Korean neutralism as the key to resolving the critical Korean issues of the day. I understand that there will be many challenging technical problems in implementing the approach suggested here. But the important question is, what better alternative is there? What better alternative is there to tackle the Korean issues of reunification and denuclearization? If human reason is to prevail in resolving the Korean issues, and another violent conflict in and over Korea is to be avoided, it seems essential for America to take a giant step now toward reconciliation for stable peace in East Asia. In international politics, the one-way street does not exist. Good international politics, I believe, is the art and skill of reconciliation and harmony to live together in peace on the same planet. And the country should not be nearsighted so as to pursue a zero-sum game when there is an option for mutual gains. From a historical perspective, one should recognize that status quo in the Korean Peninsula will be untenable in the long run, for no balance of power in international relations remains unchanged. One should also recognize the historical truth that no nation can and should stay divided forever, and realize that reunification of the Korean Peninsula should be considered a historical inevitability. If America sticks to the status quo, policy, ignoring this historical truth, it is certain that there will be perpetual tension and instability in the region, which may lead to another unwanted violent conflict in the end. On the other hand, if America is willing to change its position regarding the Korean Peninsula for the good of all concerned, then I believe there will be a looming horizon of hope for all concerned in the region. The permanent neutrality and democracy of the entire Korean Peninsula, if and when established, would become the majestic symbol of true peace, stability, and prosperity of the new East Asia. And America would be recognized for its leadership in one of the greatest achievements in world politics ever. I believe it is time for America to make the first move toward the goal of ending the artificial Korean partition by planning for the creation of Asian Switzerland in the Korean peninsula and undo the injustice done to the Korean people long ago. It should be done, and it can be done, America willing. My sincere thanks for viewing this presentation. I hope you found it informative and enlightening, and that you will support the historic cause of Korean unification and denuclearization, based on the principle of permanent neutrality. Thank you.